Good morning, welcome to a new class. Today we'll be discussing endometriosis. So this is an inflammatory condition. There's two things to this condition. We have inflammation, and we have immunodysfunction. Okay, these big words, I know, but I explain that. So two things, immunodysfunction and inflammation. I'll explain to you how endometriosis works. And mind you, there is no cause until the science has progressed so much. To this day, there is no known cause of this condition. But today, we'll be looking at the cause, why it happens, and how it happens. And if you're a guy, or if you're a woman as well, and you don't have the condition, you can still watch the video because I'll teach you how the moon is connected to your body, how the moon influences your hormones and neurotransmitters, and how that can affect your mood, the way you go to sleep, etc. Even though if you don't have the condition, you can still watch the class till the end and you'll learn something new. First, we'll look at how menstruation works. Second, we'll look at what endometriosis is. What is endometriosis caused by, according to the modern textbook, as per current theories. And we'll also look at how nature's influence, intelligence, is upon the human body during menstruation. We'll start off with the first thing, which is understanding menstruation. Okay, understanding your period. I'll just draw the uterus. So there's some connections over here as well. This is the ovaries. Okay, so we have the ovaries over here. So we have the ovaries over here. This is the fallopian tube. And in order for us to understand menstruation and endometriosis, we have to understand the diagram and how the uterus works. Okay, so over here there's a cervix, and then we have the vagina over here. And this is the uterus, and then this is the endometrial lining over here. So inside here is the uterus, and then this part is the endometrial lining. Very important to understand endometrial lining or tissue. So that's all in all the uterus. And what happens is during menstruation, it depends on every woman, but there is a 28-day, sometimes it's 31, sometimes it's 27. Average textbook is 28 days generally. Okay, so 28 days, you have the whole process of an egg maturing and then traveling through the fallopian tube into the uterus, and then the fertilization happening if there is sperm present. Now, the first phase is follicular phase. Okay, so I'll just draw a line here like this, and we have F for follicular phase. That's when the eggs start maturing. So eggs will start maturing, and there's endometrial lining, which will start building up for the conception to happen. Okay, say the safety of conception. So endometrial lining essentially is the nourishment. So it gives nourishment when the baby is born, and it gives protection. It's got white blood cells protecting the baby from any bacteria, viruses, etc. It takes care of it, and it ensures there's a safe environment for it to grow. So these are the functions of the endometrial lining. Very important to understand these functions of the endometrial lining, because later on we'll link it to endometriosis. Okay, when the egg comes here and it gets fertilized, endometrial lining is there to ensure it's a safe environment for the baby to grow. It gets nourished, it gets fed oxygen, blood supply, etc. Everything is there because of the endometrial lining. Okay, so follicular phase, first phase, eggs are being matured, and then you have the ovulation phase, which is on usually day 14. Sometimes it's day 15 as well, but usually day 14. Textbook understanding. So day 14, you have the egg, which is released. Egg is released because of estrogen peak. Okay, so there's a peak in estrogen. Estrogen, so the O, there's a peak. So over here, right at the top, imagine a wave, and the wave, when it reaches the peak, there's a peak of estrogen, day 14, and that's when the egg is released. Okay, And during, like, the egg travels from the fallopian tube into the uterus here. And then if there is, and this is called the luteal phase. Okay, so we have another phase over here, luteal phase. So this is where the egg is traveling to the uterus. And then if there is sperm, the egg will be fertilized. Okay, if there is no sperm, the egg will dissolve and it will the uterus lining, or sorry, this endometrial lining will shed. Okay, so it will just shed. The tissue will basically go through the vagina. Okay, and all the blood, etc., from the endometrial lining and tissue will, exit through the vagina. Again, that's menstruation. Last phase is menstruation. 4 phases. We have the follicular phase, which is the eggs when they mature. This is a summary. And then we have estrogen increases in the body at day 14, it peaks. That's when the egg is released. Okay. As the egg is releasing, we're in the luteal phase and it's going to the uterus. And if there is no sperm and there's no fertilization, then there is a shedding of the endometrial lining, which is menstruation. So that is all in all how menstruation works. Now, it's a 28-day cycle. Day 14, estrogen peaks. Remember these numbers because we'll discuss nature's concept as well that's connected to this. In endometriosis, according to theory, according to the current understanding and theories of the cause of endometrial tissue, endometriosis is when endometrial tissue is being shed, there's a retrograde. So there is menstruation retrograde, which is basically traveling upwards. So instead of going down, the tissue travels upwards and out of the uterus and gets attached to the fallopian tube, sometimes even like over here around the ovaries, and also sometimes near the gallbladder, the diaphragm, like right over here, the top of the large intestine sitting behind the uterus. Okay, so we have these organs which are affected by this retrograde of endometrial tissue traveling out of the uterus. Now, imagine the cycle going again. Okay, so we're going through the menstruation cycle again. Follicular phase, there's endometrial tissue developing here. And at estrogen, when it's day 14, when it peaks, endometrial tissue expands. Okay, it becomes bigger, right? Imagine this part becoming greater in size, okay, increasing in size. Now, when the luteal phase, after the luteal phase, when menstruation happens, these tissues around the uterus, they also shed. Okay, but not only does the endometrial tissue, which is normal inside the uterus, shed and has an exit through the vagina, the endometrial tissue that is attached on the outsides of the uterus, near the gallbladder or the diaphragm, this also sheds. But guess what? This has no place to go. Imagine this is your pelvic area, right? And the endometrial tissue just dropping down here. And there's no way to exit. For the endometrial tissue inside the uterus, there's a way to exit through the vagina. But for endometrial tissue, which is around the uterus, there is no way to exit. So it just sits in your pelvic area, like right over here. And that builds up over time. And later on, it causes scarring. We have areas in the uterus where there is scarring. And then the scarring leads to adhesions. So adhesions are basically gel-like structures that attach to different parts of the uterus, okay? They attach and they pull. So these adhesions, they pull. I might be going a little bit fast, but there's a lot to cover, so I'm trying my best to ensure that there is a sync, okay, there's a flow. So just stay with me. You can slow the video down if you would like to understand me slower, but I'll try my best to pace myself. There is a attachment of gel-like structures that are pulling on different areas of the uterus, causing deformity. Okay, so we have scarring, we have adhesions, and then we have deformity. All of that leads to immense amounts of pain. Even not during your period, you get immense amounts of pain. And your pain, in fact, increases when on day 14, when estrogen peaks, because the tissue will expand. Okay, so there is immense amounts of inflammation around your uterus, okay, because there's unwanted tissue. lying there. Okay, so there's pain all the time, pretty much. There is pain during sex, there is infertility, there is gallbladder issues, there's bowel issues. These are all symptoms of endometriosis. And this is what endometriosis is. It's basically the shedding of the endometrial tissue, which is attached around the uterus in the pelvic area, and that leads to a lot of pain, inflammation, and then immune dysfunction, which is the second part. So what happens is your body is very smart. It sends immune cells to areas where there is inflammation. So body detects, oh, there's inflammation here, there's some scarring, some adhesions, which is abnormal, it's not normal. So the immune cells will travel there, be blindsided. The immune cells are like, the endometrial tissue is supposed to be a part of the body, right? Why are we attacking this? Okay, just imagine a scenario where there's immune cells, they travel to find out what the problem is, but they can't really find out what the problem is because they're blinded by thinking that these endometrial tissue around the uterus, they're normal. That's what the immune cells think. And that's why there's an immunodysfunction, because the immune cells are not able to detect what the problem is or what the problem is going on in the uterus. So that, all in all, is a basic, a simple understanding of a very complicated condition called endometriosis. And almost 1 in 10 women suffer from this condition. So it's very common, and this is what happens, essentially. So now that you know how menstruation works, now that you know what endometriosis is, now we'll discuss what are the current theories, right? What are the current understandings of endometriosis and why it's caused? So as we discussed earlier, one of them is retrograde menstruation, which the tissue travels upwards out the fallopian tube and attaches itself different parts of the fallopian tube. One also thing I forgot to mention is the formation of cysts. So cysts are basically cell structures that get formed, and this is called chocolate cysts. Imagine basically blood, like just imagine blood clots coming together. Okay, so there's clotting, cyst formation, and it's called chocolate cyst because they literally look like brown chocolate pieces attached to certain areas of the ovary, certain areas of the fallopian tube, etc. And that later on causes infertility. Mother Nature is basically taking away your ability to give birth, because this environment where there's random tissues everywhere attached, it's unsafe for the baby and it's unsafe for you to conceive. You have a risk of death if you do conceive in an unsafe environment. And remember that unsafe environment, okay? Because we're going to discuss how that's caused endometriosis. The way to find out about a disease, as we discussed earlier, if it's not in the medical field currently, we can find out through nature. Through nature's mimicry, through nature's intelligence, we'll understand why endometriosis occurs. What goes on in the mind of the woman that ends up getting this random formation of endometrial lining everywhere. You can just imagine, like, thinking about how this actually happens. Physically, there's no ground cause of why does tissue get attached to different areas of the uterus. Like, why would that happen? The natural process is every month there is a shedding of the endometrial lining. Every month there's a building of the endometrial lining and it sheds. And that's how it's supposed to be. That's how normal menstruation works. But why does the tissue go out and travel out of the uterus and get attached to different areas? There is no current reason for that, ground evidence to prove why that happens. There's nothing. The only theory that there is the menstruation retrograde. Another one is immunodysfunction. So immune cells attacking each other. That's also very vague. This is actually a very good diagram of the uterus. So compared to my diagram. So as you can see, we've got the ovaries here, the fallopian tube, the uterus, vagina, cervix. Okay. And then this is endometriosis, where you have different blood spots or a tissue attached to the uterus. Okay. And these are the current theories. So you have cellular transformations, you have immune system blind spot, you have surgical scarring and transport, and then you have genetics. So in genetics, usually 70 to 80% of the time, if your mother has endometriosis, you are likely to get endometriosis as well. The gene can be triggered. So these are very vague very unconclusive theories of why endometriosis happens. But today, we'll find out from a psychological perspective, as above, so below, why endometriosis happens. The questions that should come to your mind when you're understanding this condition is, what are the functions of the endometrial lining? And what are the functions of estrogen? Is there something in nature that mimics menstruation? Is there something in nature that has an influence on our menstruation cycle? Is there something in nature that mimics the diagram or the way the uterus looks? Okay, these are the questions that should pop up in your mind as we uncover the cause of the condition. Once you know the cause, you can also basically help it. You can support it, you can completely get rid of it, and that's the beauty of finding the cause. If you know the cause, you can basically cut it from the root. Let's first uncover the functions of the endometrial tissue. I'll just put ET and then put functions. So the first function is to prepare. Prepare an environment which is safe, an environment which is conducive to ensuring that the baby grows, ensuring that the baby is taken care of. So there's preparation, there is nourishment. Even before the placenta exits, the endometrial lining gives proteins, sugar, and even milk to the baby for nourishment. And then we have care and protection. Protection, there's immune cells that ensure that there is protection of the baby, that the bacteria and viruses don't attack it and cause damage to the baby. These are the functions of ET. Now just keep in mind, just imagine where do these things happen in your life? Okay, we're gonna come out of the uterus, we're gonna zoom out, and we're gonna look at it at a human psychological level. Where do these things happen in your life? Where do you get prepared? Where do you get nourished? Where are you taken care of? And where do you feel the most protected? Okay, just think about where these functions happen, and you'll find that the answer is your home. So this is where you are being prepared for the world. And now the functions of estrogen. Imagine your uterus is like a garden, okay? And estrogen is like sunlight, it's a fertilizer, and it's water, okay? We have the fertile land, we have the area which the garden, the endometrial tissue, where there is a conducive environment for the baby to grow. The estrogen actually ensures that the baby grows, okay? So it's like a growth hormone, almost, you can say, for the baby, okay? It takes care of the mind, it takes care of the skin, the body, calcium, bone, and mood. Everything is influenced by estrogen, and it ensures that the baby grows. This is the environment, and this is like a growth pill. And all in all of this happens in your house, in your home. Now we have this understanding. Now we're going to look at the first cause of endometriosis. It's linked to your home. Psychologically, you don't feel safe, you don't feel nourished, you don't feel okay to be who you are in your environment. Okay? And over a period of time, when this happens psychologically, when there is a feeling of unsafety, a feeling of adverse environmental triggers, your body starts to act the same way. Okay, your uterus starts to act the same way. That's why, if you think about it metaphorically, your endometrial lining, so I'll just draw the uterus again. Your endometrial lining, which is over here, is traveling out. I know this may sound really weird, but you have to stay with me, because if we understand endometriosis like everybody else does, we won't find the answers, because there is no answers. This knowledge, this understanding comes from nature. Okay, so I'm not making anything up. I'm just understanding psychologically what is going on. We're putting pieces together of the puzzle, right, to form a conclusion of why it is caused. Okay, so it's basically, we're using critical thinking and we're using logic. We're using nature's intelligence to come to a conclusion which no one else is at yet. Imagine the uterus, okay, lining traveling out of the vagina, getting attached. What is happening there? It's like your body is telling you to get out. Okay, your body's telling you to get out of your home, to find a new home, to find people, to find places that you can call home. Okay, people who don't accept you, people who don't support you, who don't take care of you, who don't protect you, right? You feel unsafe, you don't feel the ability that who you are is okay. Okay, that feeling, your uterus is telling you, endometrial lining is telling you to get out, right? Find new people, find new place. And guess what? Endometriosis, it hates movement and it hates pressure. Two things: movement plus pressure. It hates it. As soon as there's a rise in estrogen, your symptoms of pain increase significantly. As soon as there's menstruation, your inflammation in your body increases significantly. Psychologically, you don't feel safe and you're not at home. You haven't found home yet. Your uterus is literally telling you get out and find something. Okay? I know this is very weird. I know this doesn't sound normal, but this is what is happening. Later on, what happens is because you don't feel safe at home physically, your uterus is literally mimicking that by making you infertile. Physically, our bodies are literally causation of our environment. The way our environment is, our body will mimic the same way. And if our body knows that we're not safe, it will take away our ability to give birth. Mother Nature wants you to be safe, not only for the child, but for you as well. Mother Nature is telling you, you need to get out, you need to find a new home, and guess what will happen? Once you find your home, once you feel safe, right, your pain will start reducing. Psychologically, you have a huge influence on your organs. Okay? And this is one of the major causes, in fact, the biggest cause of endometriosis, is you have a distorted home. And guess what? There is data, there is evidence to prove. And I'll show you over here because we have that. Adverse child experiences. Women who reported severe emotional distress, abuse, were much higher risk of getting endometriosis. Okay? In fact, 70% who grew up in unsafe environments. And then you have the HPA axis and the cortisol steal. Because your body's in an emergency alarm mode, it's hypervigilant. There is, most of the time, it's in fight or flight mode. You are bound to get a dysfunction in your immunity, and like you're bound to have an inflammatory body if you're in constant fight or flight mode. If the body constantly pumping out cortisol to deal with psychological distress, it uses raw materials needed to make progesterone without enough calming, stabilizing progesterone. Estrogen runs wild. Estrogen dominance is the exact fuel that causes endometriosis. Okay. So as you can see, there is hardcore evidence and understanding of why your home is the cause of endometriosis through understanding how the phases of menstruation work, how the uterus works, and what is endometriosis currently, right? And we come to this understanding, and then we back it with data. That's how we critically think. So you have to ask, the way you can come to conclusions is you have to ask questions. How does a uterus look, right? And that's what we'll discuss. The next part is, so I'm just showing you this. You can read. By the way, if you want to download this, there's a link in the description and you can go into the community. You can join the community. It's free and you can download this mind map for free as well. And it's a complete understanding in detail of what you should do and how endometriosis happens. So now let's move on to nature's understanding of what is menstruation and how nature looks at it. We're going to rub all this off. And I haven't gone through nature mimicry yet, but the most important thing you have to understand is the menstruation cycle, and that is the nature mimicry. So I won't go in explaining, like, if you look at a vagina, it looks like a bull, it looks like a Taurus bull. There's connections of Taurus and the moon in the esoteric world, spiritual world. And there's also like a ram's head, right? So if you look at the uterus, like if you look at a whole uterus, it looks like horns on a bull, which is turned upside down like a ram's head. But that is one part, which is not really important to understand. So I'm picking and choosing the things that is important to understand. Otherwise, we'll be here all day. Okay? It's going to draw this diagram. this is a menstruation cycle, and there's parts to this. Okay, like we discussed earlier, first part is menstruation, okay, your period, and then we have follicular stage, and then we have ovulation. So I'll just put O, and then I'll put an E for estrogen, which spikes. Okay, estrogen increases. And then we have a luteal phase, which is when the egg is traveling to the uterus. And this is where also progesterone spikes. Okay, that is the menstruation cycle. Now, guess what? The moon has a 28-day cycle as well. Okay, sometimes it's 27, sometimes it's 29.5. Okay, there is all sorts of like differences that happen usually, but on average, you can say there is a 28-day cycle, 28 to 29-day cycle of the moon. Okay. Back in the day, when there was a full moon, just imagine this is a full moon. Now, why did I put a full moon there? Because when there's a tide, imagine water, okay? Water rises because of the gravitational pull of the moon. So you have high tides on a full moon day. And literally, it's the same in a woman's uterus. Okay, there's an increase in estrogen. There's estrogen peaks at day 14. At day 14 is a full moon. Okay, 14 to 15. Again, we can vary. Again, I'm just saying, like, all I'm saying is I know every woman's cycle is different. Okay, some women have once 2 months, some women have, it's all irregular, but the average and the normal, and it may be normal for different women, but the normal understanding of a human period cycle menstruation is 28 to 29 days, or 28 days on average, and it's the same for the moon. Okay, the moons, you get a full moon on day 14, and you get an estrogen peak on day 14 or 15. So it's going to put 14 as the number, and then again, so this is a small crescent over here. Okay, and then you have new moon, which is on the period day. Okay, so it's going to put new moon over here. Actually, I'm just going to draw like small circles so you can see this is full moon. This is the half crescent as well. Okay, so you have a new moon on a period day, and just stay with me because I know like some women might be triggered at this, and I know what I'm going to say is going to be weird, but just stay with me. So we have new moon, and then we have follicular stage, which is half moon, and we have full moon on day 14, and a very small crescent as the lunar cycle ends. As we go into the luteal phase, we have, again, once we finish the luteal phase, we have a new moon. And that's the 28-day journey of the moon and the period cycle. And it's the same with tides, okay? So when there's a pull on the tide, become bigger, is a peak of the tide, and it settles, okay, to the shore in the luteal phase, and there's a pullback of the ocean, of debris, seashells, etc. There's a pullback on new moon day when there's a period. Now, back in the day, women had their cycles synced with the moon. Okay, let that sink in. Understand that, because it's a very like no one will talk about this. Okay, so back in the day, ancient civilizations, the woman used to have their periods synced with the moon. And you know how like when you have friends, you know, you have like loved ones together and they're all women, right? Their cycles sync as well, right? This is nature's phenomena, right? In ancient civilization, your cycles used to be synced together with the women around you as well as the moon. Complete coherence. And women didn't used to use any apps to check for when their period was coming. They used to just look at the moon. They used to be like, oh, it's half moon in the luteal phase or the follicular phase, and it's full moon, so my estrogen is peaking. Now I'll explain to you how the moon affects your body. There is no gravitational pull on the uterus. So if you have that question coming up in your mind, thinking like, oh, there's a gravitational pull on the ocean, so there must be a gravitational pull on the uterus. It doesn't work like that. So physics, according to physics, it's a surface area game. So if the moon has larger surface area to pull, it will be easier for the moon to pull. But because there's a small surface area in your uterus, the moon doesn't really have an effect. It doesn't have a gravitational effect on the uterus. But it does have an effect on your melatonin levels, your serotonin levels. So it affects your sleep, it affects your mood. And the way it does that is when there's a full moon, okay, there's a suppression of melatonin, your sleep hormone. So melatonin goes down. Your eyes have photoreceptors that can detect when the full moon is going to come. Okay, that's how supernatural your body is. Nature has built us with so many superpowers that it's all hidden because we're stuck in our phones and we're in a simulation sort of experience, and we never actually question our abilities, right? As humans, we can literally uh, feel magnetic fields. In ancient civilization, people used to feel magnetic fields and detect where water was. That's the power that you hold within. Within your eyes, you have photoreceptors that detect when the full moon is going to come. So your body prepares for the full moon. Most people can't really sleep on a full moon night because melatonin gets suppressed. Serotonin also gets suppressed because melatonin gets suppressed. Remember, serotonin is a precursor to melatonin. Serotonin is your happy hormone. So you become sort of moody or less happy on a full moon day because of that. Cortisol peaks. So cortisol increases, right? And there's inflammation. Okay, you have more inflammation in your body. And in ancient civilization and the Vedic culture, what people used to do is they used to fast on a full moon day to reduce the inflammation. And they used to use the full moon to their advantage by meditating all night for spiritual awakening. Okay? In some civilizations, they used to do dancing, chants. It used to be a time of celebration because the whole city or the village was lit up. Right? They could see the entire village being lit up, and they used to celebrate that. And they didn't used to sleep because they couldn't really sleep because they were so in tune with nature's cycles that they had a complete suppression of melatonin. And in fact, because we have lighting today, because we have microplastics today in the environment, because we have hormonal disruptors in our food, processed food, right? Because we're not sleeping at the right time, because we're not sleeping when the sun goes down, 2 hours after the sun goes down, and we're not waking up before the sun, right? We're not in tune with the circadian rhythm. That's why our cycles are distorted, okay? And that's the reason why you get so much pain when you have your period. Women experiencing immense amounts of pain, it's mainly because your cycle is not synced with the moon's lunar cycle. So imagine you get your period on a full moon day. What will happen, right? Not a new moon day because there's no hormonal disruption going on. On a full moon day, if you get your period, there's suppression of melatonin, so you can't sleep. There's high amounts of inflammation in your body. You are bound to get immense amounts of cramping and pain, even around the full moon, right? If you get your period like 2-3 days from the full moon or after the full moon, it's bound to be painful because the amount of lunar light there is, that detects and that influences your hormones. Okay, and quite literally, it influences your hormones, right? So I'm not making this up. It's scientific evidence to prove that lunar light influences your hormones. And it's just not melatonin. There are multiple hormones. Your hormones literally work in sync with each other. They're not isolated. Like the medical science, they isolate every single hormone, every single organ in the body, right? Your body works coherently. There's a holistic understanding of the body. So if one hormone like melatonin, which is quite potent, it's actually an antioxidant. So not only does it help you sleep, but it's actually an antioxidant that reduces inflammation in your endometrial lining, okay, in your uterus. So you remember endometrial lining, right? Melatonin ensures that there is less inflammation there, literally. So if you get your period on this day, on a full moon day or around it, guess what? There is no melatonin to take care of the inflammation. So you're literally bound to get severe cramping and pelvic pain. And again, like I mentioned, if you have your period on a new moon, when there is literally good amounts of melatonin in your body and there is no hormonal disruption, you won't get much mood swings, firstly. Your cycle will be regular and you'll experience much less pain. In ancient civilizations, women didn't take any painkillers, right? They didn't take anything because they used to bear the pain, and it wasn't as bad as it is today, right? Because of artificial lighting, because of indoor environments, the disconnection to the nature, right? All of the reasons cause the pain. Okay, it's not like you go to the doctor and the doctor will tell you, oh, it's stress and it's hormonal disruption. But why is hormonal changes happening? Why is it happening? Okay, that's what you have to understand. That's how you have to think, right? Question, why are you getting hormonal changes, right? And yes, you've been eating the same, like there's some amount of influence of the food, right? But it's not as big as the moon, okay? Your body can take care and process the food that you eat pretty well. It's naturally meant to do that. But if you're not in tune with the moon, that's actually a greater impact because it directly influences your hormones. And this is just one understanding, right? There is a lot of depth to this. There is a lot of hormones that get disrupted because of the melatonin hormone. So not only do you have less sleep, but you have mood swings, which are peak, like immense amount of mood swings. You basically stay in, like you're fatigued, you're tired. And that is how, if you want to reduce your period pain, if you want to reduce the cramping and severity, spend more time in nature, ensure you sleep at the right time, wake up at the right time before the sun, fix your circadian rhythm cycle, ensure you eat clean, that's very important, and turn off your device, so blue light effect, right, on your eyes. Turn off your device 1 hour before bed and 1 hour after waking up. Do not look at blue light because again, that will disrupt ability to be in sync with the moon. And you'll notice naturally you'll become in sync the more you're connected with nature. The more you're out of your phone, the more you're in nature, the more you're actually walking in moonlight. So just go for a walk at night, right? 30 minutes, and over a few days, right, over a few weeks, a month, you'll notice that your periods will start shifting to be in sync and be in alignment with the moon, because that's how nature has designed us. That's why nature has designed us. It's so we can use nature to our best advantage to take care of our health and take care of our body. It's called Mother Nature. We're not supposed to be suffering. Okay? Keep that in mind. We're not supposed to be suffering. We're supposed to live a simple, disease-free life. That is a complete understanding of the moon cycles, the lunar tide cycle as well, and your period. And why it's important for you to sync your cycle with the moon so you have the least amount of impact from the period cycle. And now let's look at endometriosis from the moon's perspective. That's the final part of understanding endometriosis. So when does the moon get affected? Have a think, right? If, let's say, women, they have the moon energy predominant in their body, they're more emotional, they can feel things better, right? They're more cool and calm, whereas, for example, masculinity, sun, it's more manly natures, and both women and men have both energies within them. The left and the right hemisphere of the brain, creativity, logical, right? We are yin and yang, right? We have both energies in us. So if women have more of the moon energy, right? The uterus, when is the moon affected? Have a think. It's when there's a lunar eclipse. So when there's an eclipse, that's when the moon is overshadowed by the sun. There is a complete covering of the moon. And in ancient civilizations, they have noticed this day as the darkest day on the planet, when there's literally no light and nature goes into a halt. It stagnates. Flower buds close up, birds stop singing, and people back in the day used to fear this day. Okay, they see a lot of fear because everything has stopped. It's come to a halt. And they used to not go outside. They used to fast, not eat on this day because it was inauspicious. Even to this day, in the Vedic culture, they do not recommend eating on the day, okay, because literally your hormones and your digestion shuts down when there is no light. When there's an eclipse, there's a lot of negative energy in the hemisphere. And they also used to believe that there's a suspension of life. When an eclipse happens, you can't plant seeds, you can't give birth, because back in the day, they thought that you won't be able to conceive during this day. So literally there's infertility on this day. There's a rise of negative energy in the hemisphere because there's a drop in the positive and the cooling energy of the moon. If we don't have the moon, there is no emotional grounding, right? There is lack of life. When the moon is there is a balance, okay? There's harmony within nature and human. So now, because you understand what eclipse is and how ancient civilization looked at eclipse, they used to look at it a very negative thing, right? They didn't go outside because they knew that they would be affected by the energy of the inauspicious energy, okay, the negative energy, so they used to stay inside. You can't really look at the eclipse as well. It will destroy your eyes. It's not good to look at the eclipse. That's why in primary school you would wear those glasses. So all in all, from a scientific and an ancient civilization perspective, the eclipse is negative for the human body. Okay, digestion shuts down. There is inflammation in the body which rises. So your body literally stagnates quite immediately. Okay, so there's a shutdown. Okay. Infertility, stop. Stagnation of nature. Flowers closing up. Birds stop singing. Imagine this overshadowing, right? What does that mean? The moon cannot see. I'm going to go into a very esoteric understanding of endometriosis, but just stay with me. So the moon cannot see, right? It's being overshadowed by the sun. And in endometriosis, the immune cells, they are blindsided. We're going to link this. So it's all going to come together. You have to make sure you just focus and concentrate, because it's going to get very interesting. We're going to compare the eclipse to endometriosis and look at similarities. So first similarity is the overshadow, the blindsidedness that happens of the immune cells. Immune cells can't see, can't detect what's wrong. There's overshadowing. It's like a blindfold on the immune cells, and it's not able to protect the body. Okay, it's not able to fix endometriosis. There's a dysfunction of immunity. The next thing is a stagnation. When the endometrial tissue sheds, like we discussed earlier, there's a stagnation. There is no exit point for the endometrial tissue to go through in the pelvic area, right? So hence there's inflammation, there's adhesions, and there is a halt. Right? There's no movement. And slowly, because of the pulling of the adhesions on the uterus, there is infertility. There's this disformity. Okay? There is disformity in nature. Okay? And infertility. Like you mentioned, life literally stops. That's the final understanding of the eclipse, where you can't conceive, you can't plant seeds, you can't grow things, because everything comes to a halt literally and very fast. All of the signs that mimic an eclipse also mimic endometriosis. The loss of a nectar-like energy of the moon causes deformity in you. Your system is blocked and it's vulnerable. So the eclipse is like a gateway to no endometriosis, right? You've probably never made this connection before. You've probably never heard of this before. This is all new knowledge, but this is how nature mimicry works, okay? There's things in nature that happen that can tell us things about our body. Even though in today's day and age we have complex conditions like endometriosis and other conditions which are very complex. But if you understand nature, what happens in nature, if you ask the right questions, you can come to a conclusion of why this is happening. And I can tell you how to support endometriosis by your diet, for example, by eating good healthy fats, by not consuming gluten, dairy, etc., the inflammatory causing substances. So removing inflammation from your body, triggering like microplastics, etc., environmental triggers, okay? But that is secondary, okay? The primary and the main thing, understanding, is trying your best to find a new home. If you can't do that, if you don't feel safe, okay? No one feels safe when there's an eclipse. Back in ancient civilization, no one felt safe. In fact, even in today's scientific era, you have to wear glasses to see this. If you want to see the eclipse, in fact, it's actually not good to see the eclipse, okay? Auspiciously and also scientifically as well. So as you can see, from both perspectives, it kind of makes sense that the eclipse is a negative thing on the human body, and it's not safe for the planet. If there was an eclipse every day, the planet wouldn't be flourishing. It wouldn't have growth. It wouldn't have conception. It wouldn't have fertility. So that's why, if you want to feel safe, it's all connected. See, it's all connected, right? If you want to feel safe, if you want to feel like who you are, find those people that make you feel like who you are, that you don't have to prove yourself to, that you don't have to prove your worth, or that accept you for who you are. A lot of the times what happens with endometriosis is the women feel psychologically, they feel compared to, and then they self-sabotage themselves by thinking, oh, I'm not good like them. Why does this person have it so easy? Why is that one doing so well and I can't do anything? And they self-sabotage. They go into depression, they go into fatigue, they have very low energy, right? They're not excited about life. It's the same thing. Fertility, growth, preparation, feeling good about life, serotonin. If you can't find a good home, and if you don't feel safe at home, you're likely to develop endometriosis. And the way to manage endometriosis is, yes, through reducing inflammation in your diet, etc., which is everywhere. Every textbook, you can go on Google and search up the best way to fix your endometriosis. You'll always find dietary stuff. And I can explain to you the dietary stuff, but it's not really important. That's secondary. The most important thing psychologically is for you to feel safe. Because as soon as you feel safe, your body will start repairing itself, quite literally. Okay, your hormones will start feeling safe. Your hormones will start balancing themselves out. And then the next step would be to spend more time in nature so you can sync your cycle with the moon. And once you have those two pieces come together, you feel safe at home, and then you have your cycle synced with the moon. It's literally harmony, right? That's balance. That's the yin and yang coming together, right? As above, so below. Okay, you have both the Purusha and the Prakriti, right, in the Vedic text. So there's a balance of the sun and the moon within you. And when you have that, you're literally going to stay healthy. There won't be any suffering. And I understand this may be quite triggering for a lot of people. And I understand that, yes, it's hard in today's day and age to spend time in nature, but you have to do it, right? I understand there's people doing night shifts, right, to make a living. I understand that, right? But your most important thing in your life is your health, right? Everybody has this consciousness, right? We are all hypnotized, in fact, by our phones and by the world around us. We're actually hypnotized. We don't see how beautiful the world is around us. We're not grateful for the world that we are living in, right? There is both negativity and positivity, right? But if we're going to choose to live a life which is focused on our health is our priority, then we're not going to suffer as much. That's all I'm trying to say is when you're in nature, when you're not constantly in a box every day, you have a balance, right? You finish your work and then you go outside. Okay, I'm not saying don't do work, right? What I'm saying is connect with nature, because that's your mother. That is who you were supposed to be with. So thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this session. If you have any questions, you can always comment below and I'll try my best to answer it or cover that in the next class. And in the next class, by the way, we'll be doing erectile dysfunction. So because we covered a female disease today, we're going to cover a male disease in the next one. Again, you should try your best to sit through the classes, because they will teach you about nature. Okay, more than the disease itself, you'll learn how nature works. Have a great rest of your day and take care.